Page 88 or
89 through 94. Hold on to these because I don't know if we'll finish today. It's the whole chapter 18. So it says part 28, chapter 18 on the top. Political, commercial Babylon, rebirth and destruction. It doesn't really say rebirth in the Bible, but I'm leaning in the direction that I believe it's where Babylon was in the past, and that it'll be rebuilt for this purposes. So, and hopefully I can read. I will admit that I'm missing my light. I got more than you did up there, but
You want it?
no, that's okay. I think I can manage through it. So we're going to start off the Babylon, chapter 18. So this is the economic part of the two phases of Babylon. Last week, well, not last week, the week before, we talked about religious Babylon, which most people, and I'm in agreement with, believe it's associated with the papacy. I'm not saying necessarily the current regime or the typical Catholic, because I think there's a lot of saved Catholics probably. But that Rome will be influential in this end time period, and that it could include the papacy itself. There's a lot of people that believe that. So if you want more study on that, I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago. There's a great book out by Dave Hunt called "A Woman Rides the Beast," and he goes into minute detail as to why he believes that that has something to do with the papacy, particularly the Vatican of Rome. But I think it's also going to include, as I showed last week, the biblical, they call it the Abrahamic Accord Center. It brings all the religions together, all the fake religions, I call it, because it doesn't include the evangelical type Baptist Bible-believing people in that group. When they say Christians, they usually are talking about Catholics in general. But today we're going to start on economic and commercial Babylon. This will be the one where Antichrist is pretty much in charge of. And by this point, I believe that the religious Babylon has been eliminated. Because remember at the midway point that the Antichrist wanted to be worshipped along with Satan. And they took over the temple, and they basically eliminated all religions except the one religion that worships Satan. And of course, they're not going to advertise it that way. But at this point, any remnants of a Christian-based or a one world religion, or the religious portion of Babylon, is gone. But the economic portion, I believe, is alive and well all the way to the end, and it actually gets destroyed during chapter 19 and Ezekiel 39. So that's where we'll be heading next week. So a little opening thing here. The commercial center is loved by the kings of the earth, and the apostate church is hated by the kings of the earth, as we saw in chapter 17. The apostate church is destroyed by the kings of the earth. When Christ returns, political Babylon will be destroyed by the judgment of God. Obviously, Mystery Babylon, the apostate church, is destroyed first in the midst of the Great Tribulation, while commercial Babylon will be destroyed at the second coming of Christ. These two Babylons are not one and the same city. I personally believe that Mystery Babylon is Rome, and that when it goes down in the midst of the Great Tribulation, the religious center shifts to Jerusalem, because it's at Jerusalem that the false prophet will put up his image of the Antichrist to be worshipped. Commercial Babylon is ancient Babylon rebuilt as a commercial capital of the world. The city is the final capital of the political power of the beast. Again, this is all speculation, so realize that one of the things about prophecy in this particular time frame is we have lots of verses to point to it, but it don't necessarily equate directly to a physical location. But the closer we get, and I mentioned that in Daniel 12, the closer we get to that period of time, I think the easier it's going to be able to see exactly how Revelation is going to play out. I sometimes think back to people like 1000 AD when they were reading Revelation and thinking about things like, how is everybody in the world going to see the two witnesses in Jerusalem? You know, now just about, I don't know of a single person that doesn't have a cell phone, and you'll be able to see just about anything going on in the world as it's happening. So how things change so quickly. But I believe it'll be rebuilt, and this is why. Isaiah 13, 19 through 22. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. Right there should tell you, you cannot find Sodom and Gomorrah on a map. It's basically a wasteland at the southern tip of the Dead Sea, is where they believe it was at. You can't find any remnant of it at all. Verse 20. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. There's actually a very small little town there right now that most of the workers were the ones that they were using to rebuild. What's his name was rebuilding there in Iraq. Saddam Hussein, yep. So he had started on it, and it's an actual historic site, so that you can go there and visit it, what the ruins of it. So it's not like this verse has ever been achieved. Verse 21, but wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. Satyr, that's a type of evil being. And so I have a funny feeling that this is going to be the place where it's spoken of, that basically where the, what do you call it? I'm trying to think of the right term, but the place that people are sent, like hell, but the fire and brimstone area could be located near here based on this particular verse. Verse 22, and the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant places, and her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. So that's why I believe that Babylon itself will be rebuilt. Could be wrong, and I'm not, it wouldn't bother me if it was someplace else. There's been a lot of speculation. There's been tons of books written. There's a group that think New York is it, because New York is very commercial oriented, and that's where the UN is and things of that nature. Some people believe that that'll actually be in Jerusalem, but the only problem I have with that is there's no oceans nearby, and as we see during this study, they're going to be watching it burning from the ocean, which does raise another question, because right now the Euphrates is drying up. Okay, so on to Revelation 18:1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Again, a very interesting statement here. After these things, that in the Greek is called metataua, which means after what? After these things. We saw this a couple of places. We saw it in Revelation 4 when they, and so it kind of sets up the order through the Revelation, I believe. And this is one other place. So after what things? Well, obviously after the things that came prior to this. I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and earth was lightened with his glory. So after the series of sevens and after the judgment of religious Babylon come these things. So that's basically where we're at. Progress has definitely been made through the seven seals, the seven trumpets, and the seven bowls of wrath, and we are advancing to the end of the Great Tribulation. In fact, this brings us to the end of the Great Tribulation. When we finish here, we will be spending a few weeks reviewing the end battle of Armageddon, and we'll be including these particular areas of study for that: Ezekiel 39, Revelation 16, 17 through 21, and then, of course, Revelation 19, more like 10 through 20, verse 6. Next week we'll talk a little bit about Revelation 19, 1 through 10, because that's actually a little bit of a prelude of what's happening in heaven while this is all going on. So probably about a day at most, I think, that the Armageddon War will happen. And I believe it's going to happen in 3 phases. So we'll kind of look at those. But it might take me like about 2 or 3 weeks to actually get through it, so based on the Sundays. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, has become the habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So remember what I said in Isaiah. This sounds very similar to what was mentioned about Babylon in Isaiah. So this was the preliminary announcement of the fall of Babylon was actually made in Revelation 14:8, when we looked there. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So the angel here is great in authority, that the one who made that first announcement, in the words, Babylon the Great is fallen, and become, the tense is Greek, is prophetic aorist, which speaks of coming events as if they had already transpired. When God says something is going to happen, you can speak about it as though it already happened. Because it's going to happen, it's just that sure. So in God's plan and program, it's just as though he had already taken place, because he knows the end from the beginning. Babylon, the great commercial center of the world, is going to be destroyed. So this indicates that Babylon is where demons of the spirit world and the unclean birds of the physical world will be incarcerated during the millennium. The prophet Isaiah and Jeremiah confirm this. We already read Isaiah 13, and it's also in Jeremiah 50:38 through 40. I have a suggestion, too, for your own study. I did this myself, and it's really fascinating, but it's really important to do it when you got about, maybe about a half hour to 45 minutes. And if you read through these 6 chapters of Isaiah 13 and 14, Jeremiah 50 and 51, and Revelation 17 and 18, it kind of gives you an entire picture of what's happening in this period. Fascinating little read. And it was actually Chuck Missler that turned me on to that, and when I read it. But it's kind of important you do it all at one time, so you can kind of see how they correlate with each other. But Jeremiah 50:38 through 40, a drought is upon her waters, and they shall be dried up, for it is the land of graven images, and they are mad upon their idols. Remember, Babylon has always been known for pagan worship, worship of idols. Therefore, the wild beasts of the desert with the wild beasts of the islands shall dwell there, and the owl shall dwell therein, and it shall be no more inhabited forever, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Here it is again. As God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof, saith the Lord, so shall no man abide there, neither shall any son of man dwell therein. So these prophecies find a final fulfillment in the destruction of literal Babylon here in Revelation 18, I believe. If this is true, there is no prophecy which forbids Babylon from being rebuilt. Babylon is the headquarters of demons and has been the place of rebellion down through the years. It's probably of the 2 cities most mentioned in the Bible, it's second to Jerusalem. So verse 3. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So we see here we have drunk, or in other words, are fallen, are the 2 permitted renderings of this particular Greek phrase. Both have good manuscript authority, both are true. The normal rendering is have drunk. That is God's judgment on big business, which denies God's authority. This is unholy alliance of government and business. We have seen some of this even in our day. Probably seen a lot of it, actually. It's probably back then idols were the big thing that weren't worshiping God. And I would have to say that money is probably the number one idol of today. People chasing that dream of riches. And the word for merchant means those who travel. So merchants here is not talking necessarily of somebody who makes a product, but them that push it. It's those produce goods or manufactured goods, but those who are brokers engaged in business for big profit. Business is a sacred cow that nothing must have harm or hinder So today, of course, man uses business as the biggest excuse for having no time for God. And I'll have to admit, I was guilty of that myself. Yet these same men must finally stand before God. God will judge godliness, commercialism. Big business is in for it. And I think that's kind of what this chapter is talking about, that finally God is going to destroy it also. Revelation 18:4. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues." So this verse, I think, reveals that God's people are going to be in the world to the very end. It's not speaking of the church, of course, we'll be in heaven, but God will have his people on earth during the tribulation. The question has always been, will they be able to make it through? That, or at least we know 144,000 will, because those are the ones that were sealed way back in Revelation, I think it was 7. And here we see that they are still here when we look at Revelation 14:1. And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 having his Father's name written in their foreheads. Didn't lose a single one. That's a promise always said by Jesus. So remember that God started with that many, and there's still that many. The one who is speaking in this verse, though, is none other than the Son of God, and he is calling his people out of Babylon before the judgment comes. It's a physical separation similar to Lot in Sodom. As Lot was warned to get out of Sodom to escape the deluge of fire. We saw that in Genesis 19:12 and 13. The men said unto Lot, "Hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whosoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So these people of God are warned, and God told us also in Deuteronomy, way back in Deuteronomy, a little unknown prophecy people don't even think about once in a while, but it's in Deuteronomy 4:30 and 31. "When thou art in tribulation, all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days," and almost always points to the end times. "If thou turn to the Lord thy God, and shalt be obedient unto his voice, for the Lord thy God is merciful God, he will not forsake thee nor destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers which he swore unto them." I just love it how the Bible just kind of like is one package. You know, it's you find things in the Old Testament and the New Testament that there's no way that man could have invented the Bible. Such was also God's warning to Israel in Jeremiah 51:5 and 6. Another Old Testament passage. "For Israel hath not been forsaken, nor Judea of his God. Of the Lord of hosts, through their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity. For this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render upon her recompense." Remember the first time that Babylon was destroyed, not a shot was fired. Last time it was taken over by the Greeks. And then even during the 70-year period, when Cyrus just basically let the people go. So there was no destruction then. But here we got violence and we got vengeance. So the Lord is going to bring vengeance on Babylon. So I think it's pointing to, of course, Jeremiah was a prophet before the captivity, during the captivity period. In verse 44, jumping down there, "And I will push Bel in Babylon, I will bring forth out of his mouth that which he hath swallowed up. And the nations shall not flow together any more unto him. Yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. My people, go ye out of the midst of her, and deliver ye every man his soul from the fierce anger of the Lord." And also in Isaiah 48:20. "Go ye forth of Babylon, flee ye from the Chaldeans. With a voice of singing declare ye, tell this, utter it even to the end of the earth. Say ye, the Lord hath redeemed his servant Jacob." Again, kind of like that indication too. His servant Jacob being Israel. So at this point that we're talking about here, I believe he's actually also referencing the period of time of the Great Tribulation, when a remnant of the servants of Jacob will be rescued also. And that's in my threefold plan as we go into the the actual day of Armageddon. Just as a quick note, I'm kind of in my study. I think what happens when we come back with the Lord, this is all happening in chapter 19, that we're going to hit Babylon first. He's going to wipe that out, Jesus is. He's going to come down to Petra, get his chosen people freed, because I think there's probably going to be armies still attacking Petra even during this latter part. And then, because of some other verses, we'll look at all this starting next week. And then off to Jerusalem for the final battle between the forces, Satan's forces. So the warning is twofold here. They are to have no fellowship with the sins of Babylon, and they are to flee before judgment falls. So you can kind of see it in my little depiction here. And this is a painting by that artist that I really grown to love. His he really kind of spells out some of these chapters in a painting. And you can see there all the money, the love of money that the artist put in that picture. Okay, Revelation 18:5. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Babylon has definitely a long history of accumulated sins, and God has the record. It is one of the oldest cities in the history of mankind, and is probably mentioned more than any other city in the Bible, with the exception of Jerusalem. Final judgment breaks like a flood upon the city and its systems. So one thing I try to keep in the back of my mind when I get frustrated with the world today is that you think we're frustrated. God's been watching this for 6,000 years, and he's been holding his peace, except for rare times that he kind of reminds us that he has all the power. Verse 6, reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled to her double. This is poetic justice, and even though Obadiah is really talking more about some things that are happening back then, there's a couple of verses here that actually kind of point to it. Obadiah, there's only one chapter, verses 15 and 16. For the day of the Lord is near upon all the heathen, as thou hast done. It shall be done unto thee. Thy reward shall return upon thine own head. For as ye have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall all the heathen drink continually. Yea, they shall drink, and they shall swallow down, and they shall be as though they had not been. The cup of iniquity is being filled to the brim, where the last drop is poured in. It's given to those who committed iniquity. God is right and just in what he does. Yeah, just recently I was reading something that said that, for us, sometimes we don't understand how God can destroy anybody. I mean, he says he loves us. And I think that when we get to heaven and we see what God sees, we're really going to understand the depth of evil that is in the heart of man. I think people fake it really well at times. Psalm 137, 1 through 9. It's a great psalm on this. And pay closer attention to verse 8. By the rivers of Babylon there we sat down. Yea, we weep when we remember Zion. We hang our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they carried us away captive, required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who are to be destroyed, happy shall he be, the reward of thee, as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth the little ones against the stones. That was a psalm more talking about the Edomites down in the period of time in Joshua, period of time, but that and all through the history there leading up to even during Jesus' time on earth. But I thought that was an interesting psalm with that verse 8 because it even kind of points to Babylon there also. It's always been in existence a problem for Israel. And for the world, for that matter. Almost all the different deities, things like astrology came from there, and all the witchcraft type stuff. Okay, verse 7. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she hath said in her heart, I sit a queen, am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Very interesting passage. No widow. We see in Isaiah 47, 7 and 8. Kind of helps us to understand that term. And thou sayest, I shall be a lady forever. So thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst thou remember the latter end of it. Therefore, hear now this, that thou art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly. Thou sayest in thine heart, I am, and none else beside me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. Of course, this is talking to a city. And so this city that has become the center of the world's riches, the center of world commerce, in one day is destroyed by God. And we see that in Jeremiah 50:34. The Redeemer is strong, the Lord of hosts is his name. He shall thoroughly plead thy cause, that he may give rest to the land and disquiet the inhabitants of Babylon. And also Hebrew 10:31. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. You notice I moved verse 8 over to 9 and 10. I thought it fit better that way compared to my notes. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judges her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication, live deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her, when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Kind of pay attention to that smoke of her burning, and realize what we're talking about here. We're talking about this is at the end of the tribulation. So that verse there helps me to understand why Ezekiel 39 could happen at the end, not at the beginning, as you'll probably hear many people say, because of a reference they make to the fact that the weapons will be burned for 7 years, as mentioned in Ezekiel 39. And some people say, well, it has to be finished before the Millennium Kingdom comes into play. But actually not, because Millennium Kingdom is not the forever state. They'll be still sinning, they'll still be burning. And as you see in this verse, or that verse 9, that this Babylon will be burning forever. So there's going to be other burning going on. There's no reason why the burning of weapons can't happen during the millennium either. Standing afar off, the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So this is the other idea, too, is that this is all going to happen very quickly when it happens. So that's why I'm thinking that even though, like I said, it's going to take a few weeks to teach it, it's probably going to be all happening within 1 or 2 days at the most, is what my thoughts are. So first, the kings are lamenting for the loss of their riches. In that day, Babylon will dominate and rule the world. The capital of the Antichrist will be Babylon, and we will have the first total dictatorship. The world will become an awful place. In that day, everything will center in Babylon. The stock market will be read from Babylon, not New York. Babylon, instead of Paris, will set the styles of the world. A play, to be successful, will have to be a success in Babylon, not London. Everything in that city will be in rebellion against God, and it centers on the Antichrist. Knowing dreamed that this great city would be judged, yet by the time the sun goes down, Babylon is nothing but a smoldering ruins. When the news goes out, the world is stunned, and then begins the wail. The whole world will howl when Babylon goes down. So, verse 11. How are we doing on time? Okay. Now, the merchants are upset over the loss of the riches they receive. So let's take a look at this verse. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. So when we look at this list, it's like, try to imagine walking down Fifth Avenue. And I'm going to change, I got a cute little thing to add to this. Try to imagine what it might be like. So I picked a place it's one of the places now that's similar. And I thought it'd be fun just to kind of show some pictures as I read through this next section. Fifth Avenue, New York. It's where the rich go. So imagine walking down Fifth Avenue, New York. High-priced goods that are now in Babylon. As we read these verses, think as if you might be window shopping down all these things in our day. These are the products of an affluent society, and these things were available to the Roman Empire in John's day. Babylon will make these luxury items necessities. Just as we think these items are necessities today, you will not find a cotton dress or a pair of olive oils anywhere in this list. Verse 12. The merchants of gold, silver, and precious stones. Okay, sounds like jewelry. So think of the high-priced jewelry centers of the world. And go in there and just to buy the cheapest item in there is $50,000 or something. Then we move from the jewelry department to 12B here, and fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet. So it sounds like the ladies' apparel section. Where a dress costs $20,000 to even look at it. Well, I read through this and I thought about it. I said, you know, that's true. This passage here is really talking about the rich. This ain't the common man stuff. Then we move on to verse 13. Oh, no, one more. The luxury gift department. All iron wood and all manner of vessels of ivory and all manner of vessels of precious wood and brass, iron, and marble. You imagine they, walking into like probably Trump before he became president's office on Fifth Avenue there. Now into verse 13a. And cinnamon, odors, ointments, frankincense. So that sounds like a little bit like the perfume department. Where an ounce of Chanel No. 5 is what, $1,000? Probably more. I don't even know. I've never bought it. Then we move on to the wine and the oil and fine flour and wheat. Of course, got to have the fine pastries. The food of the rich. Barley is the food of the poor. So, and there won't be any barley being served in these places. And of course, got to have something to wash it down with. The wine. And last but not least, let's see, where else am I? The beasts and the sheep. Of course, I got to have our steaks too. They get you all hungry for lunch. But last but not least, and this is the part that kind of ties in what I said a few minutes ago about the stock market, but men who are just tied to the business world. And that's what the New York Stock Exchange looks like on a common day. They're there from the opening bell to the closing bell, trying to make a buck. Probably the thought of God is not the last thing that's on their minds. So, and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and the souls of men. That's what that picture is kind of relating to. So every man was bought and sold, including their souls. I think this is becoming more and more true today, where great corporations have men on their payroll who are bound there almost like slaves. I'll never forget, my uncle used to work as an engineer at Xerox up in New York. And he said that my worst time of the year was when we got ready to launch a product, because all this trade shows and stuff. He says a 70-hour week was a short week. Usually they're more like 90 to 100 hours a week working. Talking about like double what the average person works. It burned him out. I remember he actually retired early because it just burned him out. So, back to reality here. I was thinking as I was reading through that, that was actually a passage in a commentary I saw. And so when I was reading through it, it really made a lot of sense. J. Vernon McGee was the guy that wrote that. Yeah, I didn't really ever connect with him. My father, though, when I was a teenager, he would listen to his radio show every week without fail. And so he talked him up and down like crazy. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been reading his commentaries, and they're really good. Okay, verse 14. And the fruits that their soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all these things were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. This is the part that's kind of interesting. Be standing afar off watching it burn, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple, scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster, and all the company and ships and sailors, and as many as trade by sea stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, and saying, What city is like unto this great city? So how quickly our world possessions can be taken away. Reminds me of Jesus' warning to storing up possessions in heaven. One of my favorite verses, Matthew 6:19 through 21. Lay not up for yourself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through or steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart also be. And we are probably getting close to the end here. I'm probably going to cut it off here in a minute. Find a good spot to stop. I think I still got quite a bit to go. I still got, actually not too bad. We'll see how it goes. Verse 19. And they cast dust on their heads and cried weeping. When I read that, I said, boy, that's a Jewish thing. And cried weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, the great city, wherein we were made rich, all that had ships in the sea by reason of her coastlines. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. They cast dust on, a very Jewish thing to do. For the sake of time, I won't read through all those. If you look at them, I'll just read one or two. And Joshua rent his clothes and fell to the earth upon his face before the ark of the Lord until the eventide, he and the elders of Israel, and put dust upon their heads. So how interesting, as why would there be Jews lamenting over the Antichrist city? My guess is that it's well known that Jewish businessmen are known for their business skills. Maybe the 2/3 of the Jews who are killed is not due to the Antichrist only, but those that sold their souls to Satan for riches. Just a thought. As Zechariah 13:9 says, And I will bring the third part through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. And I will say, It is my people, and they shall say, The Lord is my God. But only a third part. So that's the other 2/3 are not going to make it. Revelation 18:20. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. So meanwhile in heaven, rejoicing is heard. We will pick this up in Revelation 19:1 through 3. Foretold in many verses. I think maybe this is a good point to stop, because I can add this to next week's. Because actually these verses head into verse 19 pretty good. I think I'll stop there for now. So we're already quarter of. And let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, oh Lord, thank you, Lord, so much for this lesson and for these the looking forward to that day that we'll be with you as this stuff is going on. And thank you, Lord, so much for taking us up before this great wrath of yours, and that and we will fully understand why you have to do it, and that we can be help us daily now, though, before that day, Lord, to reach as many as possible for you, Lord. And we give you all the praise and thanks for all you do. In Jesus' precious name I pray. And all the people said, amen. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting excited. It's the part. Well, this chapter was the nemesis.